Have you ever had moments where something within you begins to feel different somehow? Familiar, yet unfamiliar at the same time, even if you can't quite make sense of it yet? Spiritual awakening often begins very quietly, not with some dramatic mystical experience, but with the strange feeling that something inside us is beginning to shift beneath the surface of our everyday lives. The things that once distracted us may no longer work in the same way. Certain relationships may begin to feel different. We may start questioning ourselves, our lives, our direction, or even who we truly are beneath everything we've been taught to be. And while spiritual awakening is often misunderstood as something dramatic or otherworldly, the reality is that for many people, it can also feel emotional, uncomfortable, lonely, or deeply transformative. Hi, welcome to my channel, where we gently explore spirituality, inner growth, reflection, and reconnecting with ourselves. Today, we're exploring some of the quieter, deeper, and lesser-known signs of spiritual awakening. Not just the mystical aspects people often talk about, but also the emotional, psychological, and deeply personal shifts that can quietly begin changing the way we see ourselves and our lives. One of the quieter signs of spiritual awakening is that life may begin to feel strangely unfamiliar, even though you may still be living in the same home, speaking to the same people, following the same routines, and yet something inside you no longer experiences life in quite the same way. Things that once felt exciting or meaningful may begin to feel empty, forced, or emotionally flat. Conversations that once flowed easily may now leave you feeling disconnected or drained. You may begin questioning goals, routines, relationships, or ways of living that you previously accepted without much thought. At first, this can feel confusing. Some people even worry that something is wrong because they no longer feel as interested in the things that once distracted, entertained, or fulfilled them. But awakening often begins with awareness. Awareness of what no longer aligns. Awareness of what feels performative, exhausting, superficial, or disconnected from who we truly are beneath our conditioning and survival patterns. While this shift can feel uncomfortable, it can also become the beginning of a much deeper relationship with ourselves, because awakening often starts the moment we can no longer comfortably live in ways that feel untrue to us. Another sign that often appears during spiritual awakening is increased emotional sensitivity. This can feel more like experiencing life with less emotional numbness or resistance than before. Feelings that were once buried beneath distraction, survival mode, or constant stimulation may begin rising more easily to the surface. Sadness may feel deeper. Certain memories may suddenly carry emotional weight again. You may also become more affected by the moods, energy, or behavior of the people around you. Some people notice increased sensitivity not only emotionally, but physically and environmentally as well. Constant noise, harsh lighting, overcrowded spaces, conflict, or emotional intensity may begin affecting them far more deeply than before. You may notice how certain people, environments, or interactions leave you feeling afterwards. Some may leave you feeling calm, grounded, or uplifted, while others leave you feeling emotionally drained, heavy, or exhausted. You may find yourself crying more easily, needing more quiet, becoming overwhelmed, or feeling emotionally raw without understanding why. During my own awakening journey, I also noticed increased sensitivity in smaller everyday ways that I never expected. Certain fabrics and textures suddenly began to feel uncomfortable against my skin, and I found myself naturally drawn towards softer materials and more natural fibers like cotton or linen. Even my relationship with food and drink began changing. Things I once consumed mindlessly no longer felt as nourishing or supportive to my body, and I became more drawn toward lighter, fresher foods while losing interest in habits that once felt normal or comforting. And while awakening can bring beautiful moments of clarity and connection, it can also involve becoming more aware of pain, disconnection, imbalance, or emotional exhaustion that had previously gone unnoticed in our everyday life. Another sign of spiritual awakening is the feeling that parts of your old life no longer fit in the same way they once did. This can include relationships, routines, goals, environments, careers, belief systems, or even the identity you built around who you thought you were supposed to be. Sometimes this change happens gradually. Other times it can feel sudden and unsettling, as though you have woken up one day unable to fully connect with the version of yourself that once moved comfortably through certain situations, conversations, or ways of living. You may begin questioning things you once accepted automatically. Success may start feeling empty if it is disconnected from meaning. Relationships built around unhealthy dynamics, people-pleasing, or emotional imbalance may begin feeling harder to tolerate. For some people, this stage can feel deeply confusing because awakening does not always begin by showing us who we are. Sometimes it begins by showing us who we are not. Awakening is not necessarily about becoming someone completely different. In many ways, it is about slowly uncovering who we have always been beneath the conditioning, survival patterns, expectations, and roles we learned to live within over time. And while this process can sometimes feel uncomfortable or disorienting, it can also become the beginning of something more authentic, grounded, and true. As this happens, certain relationships, environments, or lifestyles may naturally begin shifting towards what feels healthier, more meaningful, or more emotionally aligned with who we are becoming. This can sometimes create grief, distance, or loneliness, especially when people around you do not fully understand the changes happening within you. One of the more painful and confusing parts of spiritual awakening can be the feeling of becoming isolated, misunderstood, or emotionally disconnected from the people around us. As our inner world begins changing, we may find ourselves thinking and feeling differently, questioning things deeply, or no longer relating to certain conversations, environments, or dynamics in the same way we once did. Sometimes this creates distance within relationships, even when we still care deeply about the people involved. It can be difficult to explain what is changing, especially when the shift feels deeply personal, rather than logical or easy to describe. You may begin feeling as though fewer people understand you. Certain friendships may feel more surface level than they once did, while other relationships may become strained as you begin setting boundaries or becoming less willing to abandon yourself in order to keep the peace. For some people, this stage can feel profoundly lonely, especially if those around them dismiss emotional growth, inner healing, spirituality, or self-reflection altogether. At times, awakening can create the strange feeling of standing between two versions of life, no longer fully connected to the old version of yourself, but not yet fully grounded in the new version that is still quietly emerging. While this period can feel isolating, it can also become an invitation to develop a deeper relationship with ourselves, rather than seeking external validation and belonging. Another quieter sign of spiritual awakening can be periods of emotional heaviness, exhaustion, sadness, or feeling internally overwhelmed without fully understanding why. This does not mean that every experience of depression or emotional struggle is spiritual awakening. Mental health is complex, deeply personal, and should always be approached with care and compassion. But for some people, awakening can involve becoming more consciously aware of emotions, wounds, patterns, fears, or unresolved pain that had previously remained buried beneath distraction or survival mode. As more rises to the surface internally, we may go through periods where we feel emotionally drained, disconnected, uncertain, or unusually tired. Even simple daily life can sometimes begin feeling heavier while so much is shifting beneath the surface within us. For some people, this stage may also arrive during periods where life itself feels unstable or uncertain. Relationships and careers may change or end. Financial stress, grief, disappointment, burnout, illness, or major life transitions may leave us questioning life more deeply than before. And while painful experiences do not automatically mean we are spiritually awakening, Difficult seasons can sometimes become the catalyst that pushes us to reflect more deeply, question old ways of living, and reconnect with parts of ourselves we may have neglected or abandoned over time. Awakening is not the pain itself, but sometimes pain becomes the moment where we can no longer ignore what feels untrue, unhealthy, disconnected, or misaligned within our lives or within ourselves. There is a well-known quote by Rumi which feels especially relevant here. "The wound is the place where the light enters you." And while pain is not something we need to glorify, difficult experiences can sometimes open us in ways comfort never could, gently leading us toward deeper awareness, healing, and transformation. Another sign of spiritual awakening can be the growing need for solitude, reflection, and deeper meaning. As our awareness begins changing internally, we may find ourselves naturally pulling away from constant stimulation, noise, distraction, or draining environments. Things that once felt normal may feel overwhelming, exhausting, or emotionally heavy. This does not necessarily mean we no longer care about people or want to disconnect from the world completely. Often, it is simply that we begin craving more space to feel, process, reflect, and reconnect with ourselves beneath the constant demands of everyday life. This can become one of the first times we truly listen to ourselves without drowning out our thoughts and feelings through distraction, work, social pressure, or constant activity. We may also question things more deeply than before. What truly matters to us? What kind of life actually feels meaningful? What values genuinely align with the authentic parts of ourselves that are slowly beginning to emerge? While awakening can include mystical experiences for some people, it can also appear in quiet moments. Sitting alone in nature, feeling emotional while listening to music, becoming more present, noticing beauty more deeply, feeling drawn towards stillness, reflection, journaling, healing, meditation, creativity, spirituality, or personal growth in a genuine and intentional way. Awakening doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it begins quietly, in the moments where we finally slow down enough to hear ourselves clearly. As spiritual awakening deepens, we may begin noticing patterns within ourselves and our lives that we previously overlooked, normalized, or accepted without much awareness. Certain relationship dynamics, emotional reactions, fears, habits, or behaviors may begin repeating so clearly that they become difficult to ignore. We may notice recurring cycles throughout different stages of our lives, such as people-pleasing, overgiving, seeking approval, avoiding conflict, tolerating emotionally draining situations, or repeating familiar emotional patterns in different forms. Sometimes awakening brings the uncomfortable realization that many of our behaviors were shaped not only by conscious choices, but also by conditioning, childhood experiences, survival patterns, fears, wounds, or learned beliefs about who we needed to be in order to feel loved, safe, accepted, or worthy. And while this awareness can initially feel confronting, it can also become deeply freeing, because we cannot change what we do not yet clearly see. Sometimes awakening involves realizing that certain patterns did not begin with us alone, but may also be connected to family dynamics, childhood conditioning, generational wounds, or learned emotional behaviors that were normalized for many years. Awareness is not always comfortable, but awareness creates the possibility for healing, change, boundaries, authenticity, and a more conscious relationship with ourselves moving forward. If you would like to explore this more deeply, I also have separate videos on shadow work and the dark night of the soul here on the channel, as these experiences often overlap closely with spiritual awakening and inner transformation. As spiritual awakening deepens, we may also begin noticing the ways we distract, numb, avoid, or disconnect ourselves from what we are truly feeling beneath the surface. Things we once used to soften discomfort or escape difficult emotions may no longer bring the same relief they once did. In some cases, they may even begin leaving us feeling emptier, more disconnected, or emotionally exhausted afterwards. This can appear in many different forms. For some people, it may involve overworking, unhealthy relationships, constant busyness, or endlessly distracting ourselves so we never have to sit quietly with what we truly feel. And this is not about judgment. Most coping mechanisms begin as attempts to protect ourselves, survive emotional pain, create temporary comfort, or feel safe during difficult periods of life. But awakening can gradually increase our awareness of what is genuinely helping us heal and what may simply be helping us avoid ourselves temporarily. Because it is possible to appear spiritually aware externally while still feeling disconnected internally. This is sometimes called spiritual bypassing, where spirituality becomes a way of avoiding pain, suppressing emotions, denying unresolved wounds, or escaping uncomfortable truths about ourselves, rather than honestly facing them with awareness and compassion. Sometimes spiritual bypassing can also appear as forced positivity, where we pressure ourselves to constantly appear peaceful, healed, grateful, or spiritually elevated while quietly avoiding difficult emotions or unresolved wounds within ourselves. Awakening is not about becoming perfect, endlessly positive, or spiritually superior. In many ways, awakening asks us to become more honest, more aware, and more authentic with ourselves over time. As the quote goes, awakening is not always becoming something new. Sometimes it is remembering who we were before the world told us who to be. While spiritual awakening can include difficult emotions, inner healing, and periods of deep reflection, it is not all pain, heaviness, or struggle. Some parts of awakening can also feel strangely meaningful, comforting, mysterious, and quietly beautiful at times. As spiritual awakening unfolds, many people begin noticing moments of synchronicity, intuition, or meaningful coincidence more often than before. This can show up in many different ways. Repeated numbers or symbols may begin appearing frequently. We may think about someone just before they contact us. Certain messages, books, conversations, or opportunities may repeatedly appear during important periods of reflection or change in our lives. Many people also describe becoming more intuitive during this stage. We may begin sensing things more strongly, picking up on emotional undercurrents more easily, or feeling internal nudges towards certain decisions, changes, people, or paths, even before we can fully explain why logically. Sometimes intuition arrives very quietly, a subtle feeling that something is not right, a calm inner knowing, a persistent pull toward change, a sense that we need to slow down or step away from something. And while intuition is not always perfect or infallible, awakening can sometimes involve learning to rebuild trust in our own inner voice after years of ignoring, doubting, suppressing, or disconnecting from it. We may also begin noticing beauty in ordinary things more deeply than before. The movement of leaves in the breeze, birdsong in the morning, sunlight through a window. The feeling of stillness, peace, or connection within small, everyday moments we once rushed past without noticing. Sometimes awakening is not about escaping life. Sometimes it is about finally becoming present enough to truly notice it. One of the more unexpected parts of spiritual awakening can be the quiet grief that sometimes accompanies inner change. As we begin shedding old identities, coping mechanisms, beliefs, relationships, or ways of living that no longer align with us, there can also be sadness in realizing that certain parts of our lives, and even certain versions of ourselves, are slowly being left behind. Sometimes we also grieve the years spent disconnected from ourselves, seeking approval, ignoring our intuition, abandoning our needs, or trying to become who we believed we needed to be in order to feel accepted, loved, safe, or worthy. But awakening is not about judging our past selves harshly for what we did not yet understand. We survive life the best way we can with the awareness, tools, and emotional capacity we have at the time, just as our parents, grandparents, and generations before them did as well. And perhaps part of awakening is learning that we were never truly broken. We were simply carrying layers, wounds, fears, conditioning, and survival patterns that slowly taught us to move further away from ourselves over time. As spiritual awakening continues unfolding over time, many of us slowly begin reconnecting with parts of ourselves that had long been buried beneath stress, conditioning, fear, survival mode, distraction, or emotional exhaustion. This reconnection rarely happens all at once. More often, it unfolds gradually through small moments of awareness, honesty, healing, reflection, presence, boundaries, self-respect, and learning to listen to ourselves more deeply than we once did. We may begin trusting our intuition more, honoring our emotions instead of constantly suppressing them, choosing relationships, environments, and ways of living that feel healthier, calmer, more authentic, and more emotionally aligned with who we truly are. Over time, we may also notice a quieter relationship forming with life itself. We stop rushing quite so much. We become more present. We appreciate small moments more deeply. Peace begins feeling more valuable than constant stimulation, drama, approval, or external validation. Awakening does not mean life suddenly becomes perfect or painless. We still experience challenges, grief, uncertainty, and difficult seasons. But many people find that over time, they begin relating to themselves and life differently, with greater awareness, compassion, presence, authenticity, and appreciation than before. And perhaps that is part of what awakening truly is. Not escaping life, but slowly returning to ourselves within it. Spiritual awakening is not always dramatic or easy to define. Sometimes it looks more like slowly becoming honest with ourselves after years of disconnection, distraction, conditioning, survival, or emotional numbness. It can feel confusing, painful, peaceful, isolating, healing, and deeply transformative all at once. And while every person experiences it differently, many of us eventually realize that awakening is not really about becoming someone better than we were before. Perhaps it is simply the gradual remembering of who we are beneath everything we learned to be. There may still be difficult seasons ahead, or uncertainty, grief, healing, growth, and moments where we feel lost again. Awakening is not a finish line or a permanent state of peace and perfection. It is an ongoing relationship with ourselves, with life, and with awareness itself. And while the journey can sometimes feel lonely, overwhelming, or deeply emotional, it can also become the beginning of living more consciously, authentically, compassionately, and meaningfully than we once thought possible. If you are currently moving through your own awakening journey, I hope this video has helped you feel a little less alone, a little more understood, and perhaps a little more trusting of the changes unfolding within you. And perhaps that is part of awakening too, learning that even within uncertainty, confusion, or change, there can still be meaning, growth, connection, beauty, and quiet moments of light along the way. Until next time, love yourself deeply. If this resonated with you, please like the video and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy this kind of content, please consider subscribing. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. See you in the next one.